of those high tides and some significant coastal flooding.
Yeah, and Lou, you worked through the weekend, obviously, with this one. What did it look like over there through the weekend, and how are you looking over there now?
So gradually getting better now. We're still seeing higher than normal tides, still have that coastal flood advisory in place for a lot of areas. But, you know, Friday was kind of our peak of action, right? We had some kind of falling action Saturday, still had parts of the St. Johns River that were coming up and over the banks at times of high tide. And then Sunday had an overall really, really nice day, and now we're being blessed. But I wanted to show you this, just kind of the greatest impacts from really what we were calling Friday's nor'easter. So showing you the graphics here from Fernandina. All right, so your high tides, Fernandina, we got about 2.88 feet above mean high water, which was about 3 feet technically above what would normally be dry land. That picture you see on the screen there, that's typically a railroad track, obviously. Beyond that, in the kind of background is a park. And then you've got the Intracoastal Waterway and then a marina. So that's just how high the water was coming up. Very, very inconvenient stuff, shutting down streets. For another measuring site, very popular site here, Mayport. So that would be the jetties, the inlet for the St. Johns River and feeds the Intracoastal Waterway, about 2.5 feet above mean high water. For perspective on all of this, we're getting, that was the 10th all-time highest crest here in Northeast Florida. So that's with the tropics included. 10 all-time, and it's of course since records began in 1898 around here, but it's the second highest in a non-tropical event. You got to go back to a nor'easter. We had a pretty robust one back in 2021 where we would have had our #1 highest tides. But we had significant beach erosion. If you went up to Fernandina Beach up near Amelia Island, there are 5 and 6 foot, what we were calling sand cliffs, just kind of bites taken out of the beach, and we had wind gusts measured at 55 miles an hour at some of our sites at the beach. So it was a really busy first part of the weekend. Bobby, Rick?
Yeah, we're seeing the winds now start to come back down. It's actually very comfortable there in the southeast, but still a little bit of wind, Dr. Nab, not a whole lot in the northeast right now, and that system's pulling away. But now we kind of can, as this is calming down, we can look out a little bit more at our other system because we still have a tropical system out there right now.
Yeah, while we were dealing with the nor'easter, there were a couple of named storms out there. We had the J, K, and then now the L storms out in the East Atlantic. But I do want to turn, because those systems have been turning northeastward. But I do want to turn our attention closer to home now, because the next couple of weeks we do have some potential for Caribbean activity. And I know we've said this a couple times earlier in this hurricane season, but with the potential for development in the East Pacific, that could portend the Atlantic side in the Caribbean having a ramp up in the next week or so. So there's a fairly high chance of the East Pacific beat going on with another system going up the coast of Mexico. But as we're going to talk a lot about, when we go over the next week or 2 weeks, the Caribbean chances go up. In the Climate Prediction Center, when they issued this outlook last Tuesday, they had from now until next Tuesday already highlighted. And so that's a potential, but it's the week after that. And why is that? That is because in October, we tend to get what we call the Central American gyre, which is low pressure over Central America near the surface, and then upper level high pressure above that. And you can start to see hints of that pattern already starting to take shape. But with the warm waters that are warmer than average all the way across the main development region, it's not a shock to see what the models are doing, because what can happen is the tropical waves that leave Africa and have led to all the named storms, they can cross the Atlantic and Caribbean and then interact with the Central American gyre or just develop in the Caribbean. And there's Lorenzo, but there's another tropical wave behind that. And I want to show you what the models do once that gets into this zone where we're starting to see upper level high pressure starting to take shape. So here's Lorenzo out in here, but then when we get to this weekend, here's that next tropical wave coming into the Eastern Caribbean, and then about a week from now, with weak wind shear over the Caribbean, typical for this time of year, upper level high pressure taking shape, no wind shear over the Western Caribbean. This system will have a chance to develop, guys. And we know that it's really hard to keep the Caribbean down in late October and into November. It's usually we get something, and the problem is sometimes when things form in the Western Caribbean, they tend to want to come north. So the hurricane season is not over yet, even for the continental U.S.
And we have not seen a lot in the Caribbean. So that water is kind of untapped, right? It's very warm water. We haven't had any upwelling. Right. We haven't had a lot of that. If you take a look at where we normally look for storms, by the time we get towards September, that's the statistical peak of the season, right? And so almost everything's game at that point, right? You can see all the way out in the eastern Atlantic, but especially the Gulf, the Caribbean, even east of the Bahamas. As we move into October, though, that starts to get focus, as we've been talking about today. And then you start to think, well, where does it go? Because there are options. I mean, if you can get something forming in here, sometimes it will go west into Central America, northwest into the Western Gulf. But a lot of times they tend to come up and they tend to go out. Okay, exactly where that happens, it all depends on where the high pressures are, where the cold fronts are up here, and that's what we're always kind of watching. So in this instance, we're thinking maybe kind of 10 days out from now in this area here. And so then what we would do as forecasters is say, okay, well, what's going on up above that? What would steer this? Would it make it come up and out? Would it make it go further to the west? Okay, and that's constantly changing, right? Now, notice the difference between October storms and November storms, where we tend to see this kind of the same thing where they're coming up and out, but by this time we've got much cooler air coming in across the Gulf and across the Western Atlantic at that point, and then you can kind of see, say we have a front coming in like this, bringing in that cooler air, right? That would be your front. This is going to pick it up and take it out. So that's the pattern that we typically expect to see this kind of year. We're kind of getting into that, as Dr. Knabb was saying, but it is something that we're going to have to watch. Now, on the front of shear, this is the wind shear forecast from the European model, and this will take us out to Friday. Timing, really, if you go out 7 days, that's Tuesday, you really want to go out to next week and see what the wind shear looks like. This whole time between now and then, this is Monday, let's go out to Thursday. I think I got to stop here. There is not a lot of wind shear here in the Caribbean at all, really. Even the Southern Gulf is pretty quiet. Now, something forms here, that's going to make it easier for something to form here. All right, and that's why the models are, some of them at least, are kind of jumping on this, saying we got to watch this area. If it does come to the north, look where it would be. It would be coming into a sheared environment. And that would argue that maybe it would get weaker as it moves to the north. But again, this is 10 days out. And I know what you're seeing a lot already on the internet of people posting these model runs so far out in time. We're not there yet. This far out in time, we're just saying, hey, there's an area we need to watch. Just came off of Africa. That could be trying to do something in about a week and a half or so in the Western Caribbean. So don't think that the season is over. Guys, the season now, I mean, if you look at some of the numbers, we've kind of, as you said, Dr. Knabb, we checked off some names over the weekend. We had Karen, which avoided a lot of memes because it was in and out, right? Northeast Atlantic. But now we're through Lorenzo. Melissa and Nestor are the next ones up on the list. So, guys, that's 14, that'd be 12 named storms so far.
12.
That's average for this time of the year, but all the forecasts were well above that, right?
Yeah, and I'm looking at the kind of. I'll show you the NOAA forecast. What we looking at the very beginning of the season. Sorry, I just had this quick graphic pulled up from the very beginning of the hurricane season. Right, this is what your NOAA team was talking about: the 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 5 major, which kind of was jiving with what is average. Climatologically. Bobby, you just went through those names. We're at 12. As far as majors are concerned, we've had 3. All right, so we're right at where that forecast would be. But I get all these questions, you know, what do these forecasts actually mean? What are they actually forecasting? And we got to remember, they're not forecasting landfalls. They're forecasting development. So while we're still have plenty of time left in this season with that potential development, absolutely we could be hitting these forecast numbers, Dr. Knabb.
Absolutely, and you know, when you look at the seasonal forecast, the greatest signal that they have is formations in the main development region, and especially hurricanes and major hurricanes. That, you know, the number of named storms is a little harder to forecast, and I think it's one of the least important numbers, because the numbers of hurricanes and majors, that's where the signal is in the seasonal forecast, and that's where most of the impacts are. And as you guys mentioned, we've already gotten the average number of majors, and we still could get to the average number of hurricanes, especially when you consider what kind of systems tend to form in the Caribbean in mid to late October and even into November. They can be hurricanes, they can be majors, and as you showed the typical tracks for November, where it gets harder and harder for systems to come into the Gulf and make landfall in the continental U.S. They tend to stay down in the Caribbean or go northeast, but they can still become hurricanes and majors. So in terms of the numbers, even though we had that notable historic mid-season lull, that doesn't mean we aren't going to have the season totals turn out to be generally what was forecast. But the problem with mid to late October Western Caribbean systems is their propensity to sometimes come north. And we got to remind everybody too, guys, that what month has had more hurricane landfalls in the state of Florida than any other month on the calendar? It's October, right? So even though we haven't had an impact yet, October is notoriously bad in Florida. Not saying that's going to happen, but it's a reason to keep paying attention.
Yeah, we just stick out like a sore thumb here, especially if they're coming in out of the Caribbean. If you take a look at the water temperatures here, that's not Lorenzo, but you can see just how warm the water still is. And that's all energy. That is fuel for the fire. Think of it as gasoline for fire, right? And you'd be looking down in these areas down at the bottom where you see all these purples. This is very warm water, warm enough obviously for tropical. What the colors here are 80 degrees or higher, okay? And this, again, this is not Lorenzo, but Lorenzo's way out here. But this area in the purple that you see here, that is very warm water. And especially when you get into the Western Caribbean here, it's warm, very deep too, because when a hurricane comes over a system, over a body of water, the winds in that system will blow that top water away, and then water from underneath comes up to fill that void. That's called upwelling, and that generally brings cooler water, because the further you go down, generally the cooler it is. That brings that cooler water to the top, which essentially means less energy for the hurricane to use. But in these areas, it's plenty of warm all the way down, 30, 40 feet at least. So they can have some issues and a lot of energy, and that's one of the reasons why we watch it for this time of the year. You guys want to talk about, I kind of tried to draw here, and I'll show you this, the troughs that come through the central and eastern half of the United States. It's really hard this time of year to get a far east track to come all the way across, especially if it gains any kind of latitude, the further north it goes. But if it stays south, like this one may want to do, I always say weaker wester, because the weaker the wave is, it seems the more west it goes before it starts to develop. That may be what we're looking at here.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I always worry about the sneaky. Yeah, I always worry about the sneaky tropical waves that don't develop, And this is the kind of scenario over the next couple of weeks that could lead to Western Caribbean development. And that's often what happens. You get the Central American gyre just kind of sitting there with the pattern being favorable, and then you get a tropical wave that doesn't develop, and that goes all the way across, and then interacts with those favorable conditions that are pre-existing in the Western Caribbean, and then it forms, and then tries to come to the north. And because this East Pacific system is in the formative stages with a likely chance to develop, the conditions are getting more and more conducive in this zone with upper level high pressure there. And as you guys mentioned, the waters are plenty warm in that area. And that's why, forget what the wave and the development chances are. Just looking at the pattern, you see the dashed white lines here, this upper level high pressure late this week, just sitting over the Western Caribbean and Yucatan. That is a sign that whatever moves in is going to have favorable conditions to work with. Yeah, and in here in Florida, Lou, we're close enough to that upper level low that we actually end up with nice weather at the time of that, but it's not necessarily something we want to see because of those chances going up.
Yeah, right. And here's, my thought with this time of year, and just experience here in Northeast Florida with, storms that have developed just off the coast or right there in the Gulf of the Caribbean. We've had a storm like, thinking back to Nicole, that'll ring a lot of bells here locally. I mean, its lifespan was essentially November 8th through the 11th. That's quick. All right, not becoming a hurricane until it was actually essentially on the beach near West Palm. And so now we're getting to that short timeline, whereas in the middle of the hurricane season, you'd see those NHC graphics that give us 7, 10 days, and then we get 2 weeks to really think about an area. Now it's like, well, something may develop right off the beach, might develop in the Caribbean, and you get 2 to 3 days to think about something that's then just in your backyard. I mean, Nicole became a Category 1 hurricane and gave some catastrophic flooding for St. Augustine as it moved across. And again, that was the first week of November, very, very quick. So we got to stay prepared, think about those quicker timelines as we get into this latter part of the hurricane season. And definitely don't let your guard down.
Yeah, I mean, the season goes through the 30th of November, right? But what happens here in Florida, we get that first couple of cold fronts of fall air, that we kind of time that, we associate that with that time of the year where the season's starting to wind down. But we definitely have to keep our eyes open. Remember, I always say too, it only takes one storm. Remember 1992, we only had 7 named storms the entire season, and the first storm didn't even form until mid-August, almost late August. And that made landfall in South Florida as Hurricane Andrew. Literally changed the building codes here in the state of Florida. Now that's August, obviously, towards September. That's a busy time. But October, as Dr. Knabb says, is the #1 time for the state of Florida to possibly get hit. So something we will definitely keep in mind. We will stay prepared. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday. And hopefully, Lou, you get a little bit of a break here for a few days.
Yep. Got a week of absolutely picture-perfect weather. We do have one of those troughs digging in here by the Sunday, Monday time frame. That'll be our next best chance of rain. Hopefully that scares everything off and pushes everything away in the Atlantic side. But yeah, we got some beautiful conditions here in Northeast Florida.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Dr. Knabb, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for all your work with all these East Coast storms the last week or so. We'll all be keeping an eye on the tropics for the next couple of weeks together.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bobby.
Weather impacts your life every day. I'm 10 Tampa Bay Chief Meteorologist Bobby Deskins. You can find out about any change in the weather with our 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. Just stream for the latest forecast, any weather impact alert, updated tropics forecast, and take a live look at the radar. Anytime you want, and it's free. It's just one more way we're helping you stay informed, prepared, and connected. Stream 10 Tampa Bay Plus.
Jeopardy is for everybody.
That's amazing. Oh, yeah.
With players just like you.
Paramedic, retired teacher, psychiatrist.
I'm a little bit competitive.
That's the spirit.
Watch their victories.
We have a giant killer.
And heartbreaks.
Oh, no.
The next super champion could be anyone.
It's almost like a superhero origin story.
It could be you.
Oh, wow.
It's all happening on Jeopardy.
Jeopardy weeknights at 7:30 right here on 10 Tampa Bay.
I was driving when an 18-wheeler turned in front of me. I locked up my brakes, bam, slid dead into the truck. Bloody and hurt, I was loaded into an ambulance, and that's when I put out my phone and called attorney Dan Newton. Dan jumped right on it. He was in my corner the whole way. He fought the fight from beginning to end and got me $1 million.
Involved in a car accident? Call me now at 813-888-8000.
Dan, your awesome team deserves 6 stars. Thank you for winning my case.
Before hurricane season hits, it's time to prep your home. Secure outdoor equipment and generators. Clear debris from around your AC unit and schedule a pre-storm HVAC and electrical inspection.
Those are some great tips. And Cool Today is here to help you weather the storm. For over 60 years, we've been here to help Floridians with their cooling, plumbing, and electrical needs. We can help you prepare, protect, and repair your home. Call 888-40 today.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Let's all that talking. We really still should show you Lorenzo. It's not going to affect anybody, but I figure, you know, might as well. Let's take a look at it right now. The big headline, I think, with Lorenzo is that it's a lot weaker today. It's got some wind shear on it. It's a lot smaller. You can see it's about 970 miles or so east-northeast of Barbados, so it's way out there. This will not even get close to Bermuda. While I got you here, I do want to show you. Look at the difference between Lorenzo, which is just really kind of falling apart, and this wave that came off of Africa. That's the wave that we've been talking about that we have to watch. It's weak right now. It's broad, but it's weak. It's not organized. And as a result, it should continue off towards the west. And that's the one that we'll watch in about a week and a half in the Western Caribbean, okay? Now, the track for Lorenzo, we just got, it looks like we got the 5 p.m. numbers in here. 40-mile-per-hour winds now. So it was 45-mile-per-hour winds earlier today. It's obviously coming down.